Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar about the new features in Oracle Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio. And today we're going to cover releases 2301 and 2304. My name is Shai Schmelzer. I'm Director of Product Management for Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio. And also on the Q&A panel, Blaine Carter is there to answer your questions. If at any point during the session you have any questions, just post them on the Q&A. Blaine will try to answer them while we're running the seminar, but we can also address them at the end of the seminar. All right, so Visual Builder 2304 has been rolled out. We started with a rollout to Visual Builder Studio at the start of February. Then Integration Cloud, the first rollout started on February 13, and for the VB standalone instances, it's on the February 16. Remember, this is for the window one, so you can choose your upgrade window for both Integration Cloud and Visual Builder and decide when you're going to get the updates on specific servers. But at this point of time, anyone that has an instance that is a window one should already have Visual Builder 2304 in there. Now, today's seminar is actually covering two versions, which is version 2301, which we didn't do a webinar for, and 2304. Now, one key distinction there, 2301 is a version that we released only in Visual Builder Studio. So if you're using the design time for Visual Builder directly inside Visual Builder or Integration Cloud, and you're not leveraging Visual Builder Studio, you missed 3 months of using a newer version, 2301. And this is something that we're planning to continue going forward. We're going to release updates for the Studio version every 3 months. That's the plan. Updates to the actual Visual Builder and Integration Cloud are probably going to be every half year, so every 6 months. So if you want to get the latest version sooner, especially in terms of the design experience, you should think about using Visual Builder Studio to do your development. And remember, Visual Builder Studio is a free offering for you that is a part of your cloud account. The other nice things about Visual Builder Studio, it's a much tighter and more broad integration with Git functionality for developers. So it's very important for people who are working in teams. And it can also automate a lot of aspects of continuous integration and continuous delivery for your Visual Builder application, as well as for other parts of your application. So if you haven't looked at Visual Builder Studio yet, we did an office hour probably over a year ago that covered what's Visual Builder Studio and what it has to offer to you as a Visual Builder developer. You should be looking into this and basically migrating your development to be done through Visual Builder Studio. Like with any upgrade, we have our upgrade policy. We support the current version and the 3 previous runtime versions of Visual Builder runtime libraries and Oracle Jet. This means that in the current version in 2304, you can use either 2304 with Jet 13.1, 2301 with Jet 13.0, or 2210 with Jet 21. In all of those cases, your visual development would work. So you'll be able to visually drag and drop component over there. If your application is currently based on an older version of those runtime libraries, you will be prompted to upgrade your application. You'll see a little banner at the top when you open your application that says, please upgrade your application. You would only have source view access to your application in the design time, so you won't have the visual aspects. And you would see an upgrade button. And once you click on the upgrade, will help you upgrade your application automatically to the newer versions. And one little thing about the upgrade, sometimes the upgrade button is grayed out. That's probably because you have uncommitted changes in your application. So make sure to either commit the changes in your code base or stash them if you don't want to commit to them. Do the upgrade and then continue developing from there. And last reminder, if you're still using the Oracle SAS theme, the old Oracle SAS 13 theme, you would also want to pick up a newer version of that if you're upgrading your runtime libraries we have that on GitHub. Also, remember that at some point, this theme and the Alta is going to be completely deprecated and gone from the product. So start thinking about moving to Redwood and leveraging that. So that's some of the logistics of Visual Builder and the current version 2304. Anyway, why should you upgrade? Because there's a lot of new features. And let's talk about some of them. So one feature that is actually not exactly there yet, we're just waiting to complete the upgrade of all the instances. So it's probably going to be there in the next couple of weeks, is something called consumption metrics. And that's a feature for the admins of Visual Builder, for the instance admins. In the Cloud Console, they would now be able to see usage metrics for your Visual Builder instance. So you would be able to see things like how much of the OCPU is being consumed, okay? How many active users are there at each point of time, and also how is your database usage going? Yeah. There's a built-in database in Visual Builder, so you can see how much of it is being used. So this is very helpful for you if you want to plan things like scaling up or down your instance, okay? As you probably know now, in Visual Builder, you get a specific configuration out of the box, but you can add more OCPUs to Visual Builder at a cost to enable you to increase performance and handle more users. The way to know if you need it is basically to look at those metrics that you have over here. You can see your OCPU usage, you can see how many users are using you. And if you're seeing that you're approaching the limits of the number of OCPU, of the usage of OCPU, you might want to consider adding another OCPU. On the other hand, if you're currently with multiple OCPUs running and you're seeing that you're not leveraging them at all, you can scale down and save on costs for Visual Builder. Okay. So this feature again is going to be available for you from the Cloud Console when you look at your Visual Builder instance. We're planning to roll it out in the next couple of weeks. Let's talk about some features for the actual developers. So one of the key things that we introduced at the last Cloud World, the big Oracle conference, is of course Redwood and the Redwood resources that help you build applications that look like the Oracle Fusion application and also behave with a more modern approach to design. There's a seminar we did in the last office hour about Redwood design, about how to use it. If you haven't seen this, there's a recording on YouTube, so we would recommend that you'll watch it. But one of the key things that Redwood provide is several patterns and page templates for how you build an application. Okay, there's 12 patterns right now, but the number of patterns is going to increase over time as we design them and build them for our own team. And now you can use them also for building your own applications. Okay, so basically, when you're creating pages, our designers have figured out there's several patterns. For example, there's a welcome page. There's scenarios where you want to show information about a specific item. There's scenarios where you want to be able to search on a collection. There's guided processes, a bunch of those. And we created templates for all of those. So up until now, what you needed to do in Visual Builder is you needed to create a page and then drag the template over to it. With the new version, if your application is configured to use Redwood, okay, when you'll create a new page, you would actually be prompted to choose one of those templates. Okay, you can also create an empty page if you don't want to use our templates. But if you want to use our templates, it's much easier now. When you create a new page, it starts with the template. It's not just a template, it's the whole pattern. So all the variables and actions that are associated with this pattern are going to be created for you. Okay. Now, in order to get this to work, your application needs to use the 2301 versions of the Redwood components. And over the weekend, we actually released these new versions of the Redwood component, 2301. It's an update to all of the components. All the templates have been updated. And so you now have access to it in your Visual Builder. So if you're using Visual Builder or Visual Builder Studio now, when you create a new page, you should be able to see this functionality. And one more thing that you're able to do is if you selected a template for your page and you look at it and you say, hey, this is not what I wanted, you don't have to delete the page and recreate it. You can actually, with another template, you can actually just switch the template on the page after you selected the initial template. So it's very easy. We'll show you in the demo later on. Another area in Visual Builder that got enhancement is fragments. So again, fragments, hopefully you're familiar with the concept. That's the ability to create modularized parts of your page and then construct a page based on fragments. Fragments can be used across multiple pages, so it's also a great way to increase reusability in your application and provide modularity when you're developing, because each developer can work on a separate module, a fragment, and then you can bring them all together into a single page. So with fragments now, fragments have always been able to accept parameters that you pass into them. So this would allow you, for example, to control behaviors in the fragments, define what the fragment would do. And you were also able to send back values from the fragment to the containing page. But previously, you actually needed to create events to do that. With the new version, we have something called write back parameters. So you can indicate that a parameter would do a write back to the container. You can see the checkbox on the right side. And when you do that, when you update the value of this variable inside the fragment, it immediately is represented also in the containing page. Okay. Another thing that you can do with fragments is when you create a fragment, you can indicate, for example, that this fragment can be used as a page template. Okay, so when you create a new page, you'll be able to create a page that is based on this fragment, okay, or a page that contains that fragment. Okay. The other thing is you can now, when you define parameters for a fragment and you define their data types, we have the right data controls to allow you to put in the right value, so numbers versus strings and things like that. Okay. And we also made it simpler to create fragments directly from the component palette. There's a little plus sign over there that allows you to directly create a fragment. Okay. And once you created a fragment, you can give it a description, a name and a description, and then you can, if you marked it accordingly, when you create a page, you can see that you can have a page that contains your fragment. This is what you're seeing on the left side. We did a bunch of enhancement to the editor where you're working on your pages. One of the things is that when a page shows up at runtime, we have this little page load analysis, little clock on the right side at the bottom that shows you the performance of the page and what took time to render, like for the page to render. So this is very useful if you're seeing pages that are rendering slowly. You might want to look in there and see, for example, what took you so long. Maybe it's some aspects of your shell page. Maybe it's actually getting your REST data and things like that. It can help you tune your pages and figure out where time is spent. In the code editor or the coding environment, we support multiple tabs, of course. Each tab represents a section of your application that you're working on. It might be a page, might be your JavaScript code, action chain, stuff like that. If you're working on a big application, it might get a bit unruly with a lot of tabs out there. We now work in a way where the tabs actually adjust. So the tab that you're actually working on the code for or the visual representation for is always going to be there showing up. So previously there were cases where you were working on the code, but the tab was actually scrolled all the way to the right and you couldn't see it. Now you can actually see it. Also, if you have a lot of tabs, as you can see on the right side at the bottom, you can actually see a list of the tabs that are there and you can easily navigate between them with a little pop-up on the right side. We did a little bit of component palette reorganization based on some feedback between the versions. By the way, we also did a usability study about the component palette over the past month. Hopefully some of you attended this. We always post on our forum and on our LinkedIn group when we're doing those type of things. We're always looking for feedback from actual users. So it helps us improve the product for you. So you might notice some changes in the way that components are organized. And one more thing that you would notice with 2304 is a new advanced section for your component palette. And in the advanced, we have a bunch of jet components that weren't there previously. So previously in the component palette, we basically put in component that had some design time aspect for them. But this created situations where some of the jet components that are actually existing didn't show up in the palette, were hard to find. So now all the jet components are in the component palettes. Those that don't have an actual design time experience are under the advanced section. So you can see things like chart item and chart series, which are all ways to control how a chart component shows up, for example, are there, but a lot of other things are in there. So now it should make it a lot easier to find out all the jet components using the search filter at the top and then drag and drop them to add them to your page. One other thing that we improved is the whole delete operation in Visual Builder. So our aim here is to prevent mistakes and to create more clean code base. Okay, so there are two ways that this works. First of all, if you're trying to delete something in your application that is being used in another place in your application, you're going to get a warning. Okay, so for example, if you're trying to remove a variable that is currently being used somewhere on your page, we're going to warn you, hey, this variable is currently being used. Okay, are you sure you want to delete it? Okay, and then you can use our usage information to figure out where this variable is used to make sure if you want to delete it or not. The other scenario is kind of the reverse. It's the scenario where you delete something and up until now you might have forgotten to delete related things. So for example, if you create a button on your page and associate an action chain to it, okay, and then you deleted just the button, okay, we kept the action chain in place because we don't know, you might be calling this action chain from other places. Okay. Now when you delete a button that has an action chain associated with it, we're going to ask you, hey, beyond deleting the button, do you also want to delete the related action chain? Okay, for example. So this can help you clean up your application and make sure you don't have leftovers, variables and action chains and things like that that are not actually being used from all sorts of trial and errors that you did. So you would notice this again, this is something we added in 2301. So some of you that have been using Visual Builder Studio have already been using this for the past 3 months. Others are going to see it today. It's going to make it a lot more safer to press the delete button and make sure that you're not making mistakes and that you're not leaving redundant things in your application. A few enhancements on the services side, on connecting to REST services. One of the things we added is a type viewer for the results. Okay, so once you have a result set for a REST service, beyond just showing you the JSON of the results, we now show you the actual type structure, kind of like what you see when you're, let's say, binding the results to a variable or something like that. You see it now in the service description or service definition part. Makes it a lot easier to understand if what you need is actually what you get as a result from the REST service. Okay. Another thing we introduced is a little check for IP addresses. So we had situations where people were defining connection to REST services using hard-coded IP address, which is a very bad approach to do things because IP addresses has a tendency to change. You should always use the server name or DNS name. And we now have a check for it, and we're warning you if you're hard-coding IP addresses. One more thing for you, those of you who are working on app UI extensions, those VB apps that are running as part of Fusion app, providing extension capability to your Fusion apps. Up until now, you were able to use just specific basic authentication mechanism. We now also support OAuth user assertion authentication through IDCS. Okay, so if your end service uses IDCS for authentication and uses OAuth, you can now call it and pass the credentials from an app UI extension. There's a bunch of other enhancement to the design time. One of the aspects is if you're still working from the Visual Builder design time experience, there's an option there to delete application, right? But we ran into some cases where people accidentally deleted applications, including live applications that were deleted by mistake. And then we needed to restore from backup and things like that. What we're doing now is we're allowing you to do what we call soft delete. So when you click delete an application, we actually move it into a trash, kind of a trash bin. And just like on your Windows or your Mac, you can actually access the trash bin and you can restore stuff from the trash bin, or you can access the trash bin and you can delete permanently an application. So this is what you're kind of saying on the right side. That's the trash view from Visual Builder. One other thing we introduced is the ability to do those operations on multiple applications at once. So previously, if you had, for example, a lot of older versions of your application that you didn't need anymore, you needed to go each one and click delete, delete, delete. Now you can actually use a checkbox to select all the versions you want to delete and click the delete button and we remove all of them. Okay. That's a good thing to do. And again, another reminder here about deleting application and things like that. One of the benefits of working with Visual Builder Studio is that your code is in a Git repository. It's saved outside of your application. If someone removes your application from the actual instance, the Visual Builder instance, you still have your code base in the Git repository. You can just redeploy it very easily. So one more reason to go over there. If you're working with business object, one of the new capabilities we introduced in the new version is the ability to change field types. Okay, so by default, we create the fields in your business object based on the data type that your table is based on. Okay, but in some cases, the table has the wrong data type or not the type that you actually want to implement in the UI. In some cases, for example, people have string or varchar fields in the database where all they want there is numbers. So you can actually switch the data type of a field after it has been created. Okay. The other thing that we allow you now to do is set your own custom audit fields. So this is very useful, again, for the situation where you're creating business objects on top of existing tables in a database. Okay, so in a lot of cases, database tables that people created already have fields that represent things like the last update date or who last updated the column or the row. Okay, so you have a column like this already in the table. Traditionally, in business object, we would create those columns for you. But if you're using an existing table from an existing database, we can now map existing columns in the table to have this functionality. So we'll automatically push the information about the last update, the create date, who created and who last updated into those fields for you. So this is the audit fields and the ability to indicate which fields in your table should have that information. As you know, we are focusing on progressive web apps as the solution for mobile accessibility for your application. You're able to now create any web application that you create. You can just check a checkbox and make it into a progressive web apps, which makes it a lot more friendlier when you're accessing it from a mobile device. You can actually access it outside of the browser. So without all the browser controls, and it looks like a native application on your device. You can also add a little icon for the application, things like that. One of the things that was a limitation up until recently is that those web-based PWA application didn't support the offline resources caching. So things like all the images and stuff like that, caching those on the device. And now, if you're building your application through Visual Builder Studio, and the CI/CD process will also take care of offline support for web-based PWA application. Another thing that we added to our documentation is a little section that explains how to abort REST calls. So in cases where you have long-running REST calls that you don't want to wait for them and you want to somehow cancel them, we now have a little part in our documentation that explains how to do this. Again, if you're running into such cases. Right, so let's take a break from the slides for a couple of minutes and let's see a demo of some of those new features that we talked about. So we'll start inside Visual Builder. And I'm going to create a new application. We'll create a cat adoption application. Remember, you can change the template, and we have the Redwood starter application. You can see now we have the version 2301. That's the version that rolled out over the weekend. So let's use this version to create our application. So when I'm creating the application using this template, I'm getting all the Redwood components pre-installed into my application, so I can easily use them. So give it a second. Hopefully I didn't lose my network connection to the server. There we go. Okay. And we get a little main start page over here. Okay. The main start page is actually just an empty page, but you can see with some text on it, you can see all the Redwood components are already in here. Okay. So one of the things you can do for the page is you can actually switch the template. You can say, hey, I want this page to be the welcome page. Okay, like that. To move this out of the way, like that. Select. Okay, and then you get the welcome page template. Okay, or you can say, hey, I want it to be another type of page. Okay. By the way, and when you create a new page, for example, if I had like another page that I wanted to create, maybe like edit cat details. Okay, I can then mark this to be, for example, of the type of, let's say, guided process page template. Okay, so this would create a page with the guided process template. Okay, so this is how the process looks like. We have multiple steps, and when you click start a step, if I switch into live mode over here, you click start, there's a nice animation and you go into step 1. Okay, and then you can continue into step 2. Okay, so again, those are pre-existing templates in Redwood that you can leverage in your application. And when you create a new page, you can decide which template to use, and then you can select another page template. To select another page template, you need to not be selecting any component here. Okay, you need to be kind of on an empty space here, and then you get the option to switch the page template being used. Once you have the page template in place, of course, you can go over and set all the properties for it. So, for example, like the background color and the title. Something like that. Right, we talked about some of the new features in Fragments creation. So let's use Fragments. So first of all, over here, you would see a list of all the fragments that your application has. If you don't have any fragments, you can create one directly from here. Just click here and let's create the breed fragment. Okay, you can indicate what this fragment is going to be used for. You can also indicate whether it's implementing some of the Redwood patterns like a list layout element or an element in a fold out layout, things like that. So let's create a breed fragment. And again, a fragment is kind of a component that you develop on your own. Okay? And in the fragment, I can have, for example, a new variable. Okay, we'll call it the fragment breed variable. This is going to be a string. And I'm going to mark it as an input parameter. Okay. I'm also going to have an option here to write back to the container. So when I do this, any change that I do to the value of this variable would be communicated to the containing page and represented over there. Okay, so this is a new thing in 2304, makes passing parameters between a fragment and the containing page a lot easier. I'm going to create another input parameter, call it number of cats. This one is going to be a number one. It's a number variable. Again, will enable this one. I'm not going to actually use it, but I want to show you that number variables are going to be shown differently when the fragment is actually being used. All right, so now let's actually design our little application here. We're going to add a combo box here and add some static options here. This is going to be the breed of the cat that you want. So for example, we get a Siamese cat and we have, what other cat we have? We have the Maine Coon cat. And we have, for example, a Bengal cat. And there's also a Bambino cat. So I don't know if you knew that there were so many types of cats, but yes, there are. Okay, there are many more. This is what I have a combo box here. Anyway, this is going to be bounded into this variable called the fragment grid. So we're going to populate the grid with whatever is selected over here. Okay, and we can say here, choose a grid. All right. So now we need to show some data here about the cats. So we're going to create a new service connection. And I'm going to use my little cat service here. So again, this is just a random REST service hosted somewhere on the cat, on the internet, not on the cat. It's hosted in a website called the Cat API. Very nice way to learn about using REST services, for example. So we're going to create this cat service. Okay. And there's actually in the request, there is a parameter, which is the breed IDs. Okay, so this is the breed that you want to get information about. Okay, there's another parameter here called limit that you can pass in about how many records to get back. Right, and I'm going to click create now. If you remember up until now, when you click create, it would prompt you, hey, you didn't actually test and gave us the results. So we now actually do it automatically. So if you go over here and you look at the response, you can see the typical response, and you can also see the type structure. So this is the structure that we're getting back from this REST service. We're getting an array, and inside the array, we have those properties for each one of the cats. And this service, by the way, all it does is return images of cats. So if we now go back into our little application, look at the data palette, we can see our service, the cat service, and there's the endpoint here to get many cats. Bring it into the page, drop it over here as a little list, and we're going to just get ourselves the images of the cats. So it's the URL property here. There's a parameter here, which is the breed of the cat, and we're going to pass this over from the combo box variable. All right, so let's see if this actually works. Choose a Maine Coon cat, and we got a Maine Coon. Okay. One of the things we can do now is we can update the list view. Maybe instead of showing it as a little list, we'll show it as cards. Maybe instead of using an image component, we'll use a more popular or modern avatar representation. Put an avatar here, set some background to it, make it a little bigger. Okay, and maybe make it even circular, and then bind it to our data and specifically to the URL. Right. So if we now go and switch to Bengal, we get an image of a Bengal cat. Okay, we don't need the little image, so we can remove this one. All right. By the way, right now we're just fetching one cat, so maybe we should just update here the limit. By default, we should maybe fetch 6 cats. That'd be better. Makes our application a little better. All right, so choose a Bambino cat. We get 6 Bambino cats. Maybe you don't like this type, but it exists. All right, so now we created our little fragment. Okay, remember this fragment has an input parameter, which is the default or the initial breed that we want to use. Now we can go back to our main page. Okay, and previously we looked here for fragments. Now we got the breed fragment over here, and we can just bring it into our little page. So before we bring it in, let's put in an input text field inside here in the default area. This would be bound to a new variable on the page. We'll call it the page breed to distinct it from the breed variable that is inside the fragment. And then we're going to bring in the fragment. We can look up cats or fragment. Fragment, because it's called the breed fragment. bring it in just below it in here. All right. Now, Fragment has two parameters. You can see different types of parameters. So number of cats can be, for example, 5. And the Fragment Grid, we're going to map this to our page grid variable. Okay, like that. So now if we, for example, in the page, if we put Siamese cat, it's going to get Siamese over in the fragment. And if in the fragment we're going to do Bengal, it's going to update our page variable. So you can see two-way communication of our variables between those environments. All right. Other things that you can do here that I wanted to show you in terms of new features, if we'll pull up and add a button, let's say just between those two, and we'll associate this button with an event. And in this event, we're going to assign, for example, a value for the grid. Okay, like that. Okay, and then you go back over here. Oh, and maybe you're going to your variables and you're trying to remove this variable. Okay, you get a confirm delete. Okay, and it tells you that page grid variable is still being used in the application. Are you sure you want to delete it? So before you delete it, pause, think, where is it being used? You can see the usage both in the button action and in the main start, and maybe, hey, maybe you decide, hey, I don't actually want to delete it. It's actually important for my functionality. Okay. Maybe you said, hey, you know what? I want to actually delete this button that we have over here. I don't need it anymore. Okay. We're going to prompt you to say, hey, this button also has an event listener, okay, and an action chain associated with it. Okay, those are the two things you can see here. When you delete this button, do you actually want to remove them? So I can say yes. Okay, and we then remove the event listener and the action chain that was associated with this button. So this is kind of the smart delete. I don't have a lot of tabs here to show you this, but let's say if I wanted to create, if I want to create a new page, by the way, maybe a specific main grid page, I can see my fragment over here as something that I can base my page on. And one of the things to note here is that when you're working with a fragment, the fragment itself can have a bunch of properties. Okay. So if let me see if I can get this to show up here. Yeah. So again, if you click on an empty space here, you would see the fragment properties. So you can give it a title, fragment chooser, choose a cat type, for example. And you can even change the icon. Okay, so maybe we have like a little search icon here, because we can search for specific breeds. So those are properties of the fragment itself, including, for example, what it's going to be used for. And once you put this information here, when someone goes over to create a new page, okay, and they want to create a new breed page, they would now see this information over here with the icon, description, and title over here. And they can say, hey, I need a new page that uses this fragment. So now I have a regular page with the fragment already embedded inside it. So again, make it easier to start pages from existing content that you have over here. Okay. Let's open a few of those tabs here. I'm gonna open some more here. Maybe we have some CSS. I don't know, we don't have any meaningful things here. Maybe I'll do it the other way. I'll just make it a little smaller. So you can see as I'm working on this page right now, this is the tab that shows up. Okay, if I were to switch to work on this page, this tab would show up. Okay, so the thing that you're working on right now is always going to be the active tab that you're going to see here. If you don't have enough space to show all the tabs, you have the ability to move between them using this little drop down over here on the right side. Okay, so this is again helping you when you have a lot of tabs in your application. So I think this is some of the key things I wanted to show you here. Oh, let's talk a little bit about the business object, new features. If I set this application to use business object from an existing schema in my database, okay? When I create a new business object, I'm not going to create it from scratch. I'm going to base it on a table in my database, have the amp demo table over here. So I'm just going to pick it up as it is right now from the database. So with whatever structure was created here. And you can see, for example, the salary field in the database, it's actually a string. It's a varchar column over there. But I can go and say, hey, you know what? In our application, salary is always a number. So I can take the type of this field and switch it to be a number. Okay. Note the warning here, okay, about the existing data and things like that. Always take care before you change a type in the application, because it has implications on the data that is in the database itself. Okay. Also, the other thing I can see here, there's a hire date, which is when this record was created. So one of the things I can do is I can mark this column to be my history column. I just forgot if it's done from here. No, it's not from here, sorry. See what to do. Yeah, I forgot where you set it up. Okay. But you'll be able to switch in your table property to indicate where this, which columns are going to be with this information. Okay, I'll look it up and I'll blog about it and we'll cover it over there. All right, so those were some of the key things we wanted to show you about new features in the design time. Let's talk a little bit about Visual Builder Studio. Okay, and what's new in Visual Builder Studio? Again, 2 releases, 23.01 and 23.04. And one more thing, since last week, Visual Builder Studio is now also an OCI native service. So up until now, if you wanted to create a Visual Builder Studio instance, you would go into the OCI Classic services. But from last week, if you look under Developer Services in the Cloud Console, you would see Visual Builder Studio along with Visual Builder as an option here as a true OCI native service. And this also means, by the way, that you can use the OCI command line to manage your instance, and all the setup and things like that of the instance itself are going to be a lot easier now in terms of the VMs and the compute resources that are being used. So this is great for people who are about to start using Visual Builder Studio. If you want to spin up a Visual Builder Studio instance, go into Developer Services, Visual Builder Studio, and create an instance. If you already have a Visual Builder Studio instance, it's probably still on the old run on OCI, but not OCI native. Over time, we're going to automatically migrate you to an OCI native service over the next month. Over the next year, basically, we're going to do this migration for you, so don't worry about it now. Functionality-wise, it's the same functionality that is already there, nothing specific there that you should be missing on. All right, some things that we added to Visual Builder Studio in terms of project management. We now are able to define file ownership. Okay, so you can indicate for specific files or for complete directories who owns them, and this would help you in terms of things like who is the default reviewer for those files and changes that you do there. Okay, so if you're interested in tightening up who can modify files, who owns files, who get notified about changes, this is a feature to look into. And we also added a bunch of information. When you look at a file, we now tell you how many lines of code are in this file and what's the size of the file. So again, helps you if you're looking into, hey, what's my biggest file? Maybe I need to break it down into a more modular approach, things like that. It can help you over there. If you're working with workspaces, you know that workspaces are associated with a specific environment. Okay, so when you create a workspace or a Visual Builder application or a Visual Builder extension to Fusion apps, it's mapped to a Visual Builder instance or a Fusion app instance. But sometimes that instance is down, maybe it's in maintenance, maybe there's some work being done on it, but you still want to continue to work on your workspace. So what we allow you now to do is from this little menu over here, you have this option to switch environment and say, hey, take the code in this workspace, and instead of using this environment, let's use another environment. So this is, for example, if you want to switch the workspace from using one test environment to another test environment, or one dev environment to another. Okay. We did a bunch of work on the merge request enhancement. Okay. So this is basically pull requests that you're doing in your Git repository. One of the things is that when you're doing a merge request, people can mark things that need attention. Okay, for example, when you're part of the merge request is a code review process in a lot of cases, where people look at the code that you created, can give you comments, they can mark things as need attention. This ability to mark things as need attention is not new, but what you can do now is you can indicate for a branch that before someone can merge code into this branch, all the need attention things need to be resolved. Okay, so this is something you set at the branch protection setting. Okay, if the branch requires review, you can set, hey, everything that is marked as need attention need to be in a status of resolved. Okay. Another thing that we enable people to do now is edit their code comment. Again, make it a lot easier than if you did a mistake on a comment that you gave. Instead of having to create another comment to fix it, you can now go and directly edit the comment that you gave. And because conversation on code can get pretty lengthy with people giving you feedback, we now have a filter that allows you to filter conversations. So search for specific things that were said by specific people or on a specific date or relating to specific text. Okay, so this is a little icon that you get to see in the conversation area for code review. On the CI/CD front, this is the part that basically takes your application, package it, deploys it. Again, doing it for a lot of artifacts, including Visual Builder application, FA extensions, but a lot of other things, including Oracle integration. So if you're working with Oracle integration for a long time, we've been able to take integrations from one instance, export them and import them into another instance. Then we added the ability to also work at the package level. So take multiple integrations and move them as a package from one instance to the other. In 2304, we added the support for doing the same for lookups and for also updating the connection information for integration. So this gives you an even fuller CI/CD solution for the Oracle Integration Cloud. If you're looking to DevOps automate your integration cloud, this is a great solution to do that. Okay. And we now allow you in a build to specify a parameter that is a mandatory parameter that can't be empty. This would help elevate situations where people forgot to set a value for a parameter. Okay. We can, of course, have a default value for that if people don't set it, but we can mark it as a mandatory thing that people have to set. And then the whole notion of pipelines, the ability to take multiple build jobs and streamline them, create a specific flow of them. We redid the whole design for that. Also the way that you look at pipeline and the information about them. One of the things that, one of the reasons we did this is to make it more accessible. So people with disabilities that are using screen readers can now leverage the pipeline features more easily. So the way that you work with pipeline has changed. You now right click on stuff to edit your pipeline. I'll show you that in a demo again in a few minutes. Okay, actually, let's show you the demo now. All right, so let's switch over to Visual Builder Studio for a second. We'll take one of our projects over here. And we can, for example, let's start from the pipeline concept. So if we have a bunch of build steps that we defined over here, we can also create pipelines. Okay. So first of all, there's a new view to the pipelines. Over here, you can see different types of information. Instead of showing you the diagrams up front, we show you the actual names. This is very helpful when you have a lot of pipelines in your scenario. And we show you different pieces of information, like the status of the pipeline, the last run, the overall weather, how many jobs are here. You can see a little bit more details about the pipeline and a bunch of operation you can do on the pipeline, like run it, go to the last run log, stuff like that. When you create a pipeline, so let's create, for example, maybe we have a VB test pipeline. I don't actually have build jobs for that, but we'll do a new pipeline like that. When you create it, we give you this interface to define the pipeline. And then you start from a specific point, you right click, and then you add what would be the first step. Okay, so the first step might be we're running a package of the application, like that. Then from this step, you right click and you can say, hey, let's add what is going to happen if the package is successful. We're going to do a deploy. You can also add a step for what happens when something fails. Okay, so for example, if it fails, we want to do some test, for example, run some tests. So you can see, hopefully you can see this is a red line, this is a green line. If the test fails, you can also add what's going to happen on a test fail. Maybe we need to do some integration CI/CD or something like that. So this is how you create your pipelines now. Okay. You can also do an edit, so you can modify what's happened on a success job, for example. You can say, hey, actually what I want to do is run this step over here. Okay. So you can basically add another step over here that also connects this step after that step. So this is how you define a pipeline. Okay. Again, remember, right click and there's a bunch of options there. And then when you run the pipeline, this pipeline would probably fail because it doesn't do much. You would see the pipeline status over here. You can see how many jobs are in this pipeline. Okay, we have 4 jobs. You can see the details, and you can also from here directly access the pipeline log. Okay, so to see what's happening in the pipeline right now. So this new interface, by the way, also in the job area. Okay, we modified it so you can now access the log directly from here. Again, showing you the same type of information at the build job level running from here. So you can see this job, the package job right now is running, and you can actually go over here and view the log for this as it's happening. Okay. This is one thing I wanted to show you in terms of the CI/CD. The other thing I wanted to show you is the merge request capabilities. Again, merge requests are when you do a change in a code and you want to merge it from a branch that you did the changes into the main line of code. We have this concept of conversation here. Okay, so there are reviewers of the code. So let's look at this from the perspective of, instead of Shai, we'll switch over to Jeff. Jeff has the same merge request over here. He can look at the merge request. He sees the same conversation over here. He can see the changed files. He can see the specific things that were changed. He can actually go over and give comments on the line of code. So for example, he can say, should say cat breed, like that. Okay, and give a comment and mark it as need attention, for example. Okay, this would tell whoever owned the code, hey, you need to actually pay attention to this. Okay, oh, but Jeff might have noticed that this should actually be uppercase B over here. So instead of having to create another comment, he can go over and edit this comment and switch it to say uppercase B. Okay, so this is a new feature, edit. Okay. From the perspective of Shai, again, if I look at the code review over here and the conversation here, I can see the latest comment here. This should say cat breed. Okay. Again, if the conversation gets too long and I'm only interested in comments that Jeff gave in the conversation, I can filter it this way. Okay. If I'm interested in all the conversation, but only in things that relate to cats, I can filter it that way. Okay, I can filter commits versus comments, again, helping us work on this code review process more efficiently over here. All right, so we're approaching our time to finish today's seminar. Hopefully, you've seen a lot of new features that will be useful for you as you develop. This was a quick introduction to all of them. In our documentations for both Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio, there's a specific chapter for new features. I highly recommend going over there, reviewing all the new features. We didn't actually cover all the new features in today's seminar. We covered the main ones, but there are other things that you might want to learn on. In the documentation, we also have links to documentation on each one of those new features, teaching you more about how to use it. On our blog, on blogs.oracle.com/vbcs, this is where we are going to post about the new features. We're going to have new blog entries about the new capabilities coming up in the next week. So keep an eye over on there. Also look it up for a lot of how-tos and information that would help you use Visual Builder in general. If you're running into any questions, your first line of defense, the first place where you can ask any technical questions about how to use Visual Builder, if something doesn't work, is our Cloud Customer Connect forum. Okay, we have forums for Visual Builder and Visual Builder Studio. They are free to use. Just go over there, post your questions. They are monitored by us product managers, by developers as well, by other people in the community that are helping each other. So join that part and help each other resolve issues. This is also a great place if you run into a question. There's a very high likelihood that someone already ran into the same issue, same question. Do a search there, you might find the answer already in there. If you want to keep up to date with what's the latest things in Visual Builder, we have a LinkedIn group called the Visual Builder LinkedIn group. So just go to LinkedIn, search Visual Builder, join the group. It's free to join. We keep this group focused on everything related to Visual Builder. When we have new versions out, we notify you there. When we have seminars like today's seminar or events, we notify about those there. Every new blog entry is there. A lot of our community members have started blogging about Visual Builder and posting their entries over there. So it's a great way for you to increase your knowledge about using Visual Builder. So those are a lot of resources that can help you learn more. Let me see if there's any open questions right now. Questions about when Alta is deprecated, what will go away or not be supported. At some point, we're going to remove the Alta CSS and things like that from the JET distribution. Okay. And at that point of time, your Alta-based application would simply not have the resources to be able to run with the same look and feel. It's important to mention that Alta has already been deprecated. Okay, so there are no bug fixes, or bug fixes sometimes there are, but there are no new features. There's a lot of new features in Redwood, in the Redwood theme, that you don't get with Alta. So you should really start looking into moving into Redwood if you haven't done it already. Blob types in business object, that's something that we have an enhancement request tracking this. If this is a requirement for you, please file it with Oracle support so we can track the popularity of this requirement. I'm trying to find progressive check button. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Can we link a REST API to a DB table in Visual Builder? Visual Builder can basically access any REST API. We don't care what the REST API is mapped to. It can be mapped to an Oracle database or not. If your question is, if I have a database table, can I create REST APIs for that table with Visual Builder? Yeah, this is exactly what business objects in Visual Builder are doing. Can you use Visual Builder to gray out fields in Oracle Fusion? Yes, if the fields are customizable, if the page that you're looking into is configurable using Visual Builder, and the team decided that you're supposed to be able to do it, yeah, you can basically modify the disable property over there. If your instance, by the way, is still on 22.10 or probably not any earlier versions, the earliest that we have right now out there is 22.10. If your instance is still on 22.10, it's likely because you selected Windows the update window to be window 2, okay, either for your Oracle Integration Cloud or Visual Builder. They would be updated probably in the next, I think, in next month, in March. So that's the date for those. In general, if you want to pick up the updates sooner, make sure that you're set up to window 1. The admin guide for Visual Builder has a section that explains how to do that. You're not going to see any prompt to upgrade for existing instances. We do the upgrade for you. Visual Builder is a managed instance. When you open an application that is based on an older version, the little prompt to upgrade is going to be there. If you're not seeing it, just go to the application setting and there's an upgrade button there that should be able to upgrade your application to the latest runtime libraries. I think that's all the questions we have today. Again, if you have any further questions, please post them on the Cloud Customer Connect. You can also ping me on Twitter. I'm at Shy Oracle on Twitter. I also try to post all the new stuff over there on my Twitter feed. So if Twitter is where you're going for information instead of LinkedIn, please follow me and I'll try to keep you up to date. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hopefully this has been an insightful seminar, help you learn some of the new features, and we're looking forward to get your feedback on those new features. Thanks and have a great day.